I'm going to talk about, maybe give you some resources to help you with some of the planning and some thoughts on this. But to start with, just some questions. Questions are more related towards infrastructure. There are 3 points here. You click on them. One is protect capital investments. The second one is minimize economic impacts and minimize social impacts. Probably a fourth one you might want to consider is some of your ecological impacts too, to help minimize that. The adaptation methodology, there's sort of a system that you go through, and I've sort of summarized here. One, identify critical. What facilities are we trying to protect and how important are they to the community? Secondly, determine climate change vulnerability to critical facilities. What are the climate change impact vulnerabilities to those critical facilities in the community? Develop a prioritized strategy to address them. Which vulnerability has the greatest risk and how are we going to deal with it? And fourthly, integrate your strategy into your capital program. Whatever we do, we're going to have a program. You have to think about how you're going to put it into that because you have funding constraints. And this is the best, probably the best way to deal with it, to try and incorporate it into your, as you do projects. Next slide. This is just a risk assessment model that FHWA put together. They had 5 pilot studies in New Jersey, Virginia, Washington State, California, and Hawaii to test out this assessment model for climate change vulnerability and risk assessment. The model incorporates inventory of assets and climate data as some of the inputs up to the top. Similar models have been developed by New York City and through FHWA's Gulf Coast study. Next. Identifying critical transportation facilities should reflect the values of your community. Traffic volumes are important, but so are redundancy and access to healthcare facilities, access to emergency facilities, and access to major employment centers. What I'm saying here is every community is different, and you have your own critical things you have to determine. The Gulf Coast study, phase 2, which was a study down in the Mobile, Alabama area, was talking about identifying critical infrastructure and looking at it from the community base. And I recommend this as a resource for looking at determining your critical infrastructure within your community. Not all of the things that are in that study are going to apply to facilities that we have here in the Adirondacks, but you can adapt that study, some of the findings, the strategies they use to your communities. And this is just talking about some of the measures of criticality. They had a matrix that talked about socioeconomic, and then the next slide they're talking about use and operational. This is talking about your highways, any other facilities. Some of you may have transit, you may have some sort of small transit systems in your community. As part of those assessments, the studies FHW is the pilot studies, Washington State did a climate impacts vulnerability assessment. And they emphasize using your own local experts and asking questions. What keeps you up at night? What if it gets worse, given a scenario? How resilient is their system? And I would recommend this study, and there's a website there, is to look through how they did it in Washington State. They have a lot of mountainous area in Washington State, not too dissimilar to the Adirondacks, and I think it would probably be a good resource to use to look at that.
Art, is that link on the handout in the packet?
It's. Did you
yes,
send the whole slide?
Yes, but it is in your package. 4th slide, 1st page.
It's on the slides.
Right at the bottom right.
Okay. And I want to probably end this with some implementation strategies. One, focus on critical areas that are already problems, which you anticipate to be problems. You know what you folks know in your community, what are your problem areas. You know that those are probably going to get worse with more higher levels of precipitation. That's going to be your focus. Secondly, as you design replacement, this has been talked about already this morning, as you design new replacement facilities, as part of your program area, your capital program, you need to look into the future, as Elizabeth was saying, and determine what's the climate going to be like 60 years from now, at the end of the life of the culvert, or what's it going to be like 100 years from now, at the end of the life of a bridge, 75, 100 years. And as you do that, as you do those replacement structures in a replacement cycle, or if you have to replace them as part of an emergency, this will help guide you as to what you need to do. And one final point, even if funding is not available, prioritize your list of adaptation actions you need to take. Having those priorities set will put you in a better place to capture any additional funding that may become available for climate change adaptation. I don't know whether there's going to be any special funding for it. All I know is if you have a plan in place, you're going to be better prepared to capture any funds that may come along. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.